merged and became part of something called the Omnicom Group, a much bigger advertising conglomerate. I decided to rejoin the advertising world, became part of Compton, became part of Omnicom, sold Millsport to them, and remained with them all the way until 2004, at which time Millsport got merged with another agency under Omnicom, and I decided to leave the agency to try a different entrepreneurial venture. And over those long period of years, one of the things I'm most proud of is that our agency had a great record of what I would call long-term client retention of our biggest sponsors, of our biggest clients. And those were Visa and PepsiCo, GTE, American Airlines, Russell Athletic. And we did great work for a long time with those big clients. NBC Sports was a client for over 20 years. So that was kind of our claim to fame as an agency, where we did good work, we retained business, we kept coming up with fresh solutions for our clients, and that's what led the agency to do well and to succeed. We had 18 straight years of year-over-year profit growth, and at the end of my leadership there, we had about 105 employees, so we grew from 2 to 105 over the years, and really had a nice run, if you will. Then I went into something called partnership marketing. I set up a internet business called Partnershop, the idea of which, and Omnicom was an investor in that business, but the idea was to create a kind of a mini Amazon where the clients of Omnicom could cross-network with the employees of Omnicom clients for shopping discounts and special retail purchase opportunities. So that became my venture after Millsport. I was frankly a little bit arrogant at the time. I didn't really have e-retail business experience, so kind of jumped into a whole new line of work from sports marketing, and learned a great deal in that time of what I didn't know about e-marketing and online sales. But still a great experience, worked out very, very well. And that kind of is mostly the overview from sports marketing. In the last couple of years, I went into another venture called Alumni Row, where the idea was to market very upscale hospitality outings to high-end sports events. And we unfortunately started with the 2020 US Open at Wingfoot. I reached a contract with the USGA to launch Alumni Row at Wingfoot. And then when COVID hit and ended all spectator attendance at the Open, and of course many other events, that was really the end of the Alumni Row launch. So that's the overview from my end. Tremendous fun, tremendous volume of work, a lot of experience with the NFL, Super Bowl, Olympics, NASCAR, PGA Tour, which were kind of the major properties that we linked clients to and managed client sponsorships for during all those years at Millsport.
Yeah, I mean, pretty tremendous career, Jim. Congratulations. It's amazing to me. Now, when I was in college athletics, we had when we nominated somebody for the COSIDA Academic All-America, it was through your we literally had to send the material.
And Dave, that.
Yeah.
Dave, that was one of our best case studies. Years and years ago, we came up with the idea of the Academic All-Americans, the best college student athletes, would be a great program for corporate sponsorship. So we went to the sanctioning group that ran that program, a group called COSIDA, and we reached an agreement with them to bring them a sponsor, and we were able to sign GTE, a big DDB client at the time, to be the title sponsor. It had a nice ring to it, the GTE Academic All-America teams.
Yeah.
What was remarkable is the complete annual title sponsorship, 400 student athletes a year, all the sports, all the colleges, all the conferences, cost GT $30,000 a year annually in rights. It was really kind of a steal back then.
Yeah.
And it ran incredibly 18 years, really a long-running program. We recommended and signed Dick Enberg, a famous sportscaster, as the spokesman. He was a college professor, really liked the academic idea. A few years into it, we invented a spin-off called the Academic All-America Hall of Fame, which recognized great student athletes who then went on to have career success. And it became GTE's largest and most important national public affairs program. It opened the doors for them to sell phone systems into colleges. They did hundreds of presentations at assemblies and half times where they would present the certificate of accomplishment to the student athlete. And it was, I think, by far one of my most fun projects, just because of the good nature of it, and frankly how positively the colleges accepted it. It was really a nice adjunct to the emphasis on just athletics, and to have a focus on the student side of it was really terrific. And it's funny you mentioned that, Dave, because it was one of our really bellwether programs.
Yeah, no, it was a great program, and I mean, we have some people in college athletics on this in this class and on this Zoom call. So I'm going to ask them. Does anybody know what Coach Sida is? Think about your sports information director. Coach Sida is the College Sports Information Directors of America, right? So this.
I know what it is. Sorry.
You got it.
And they exist somewhat in obscurity in terms of the national sports scene. Their job is, just as it describes, to provide sports information to people who follow or report on college sports. So they are really critical to the whole college sports fabric, if you will. And they ran this academic All-America program for a number of years before we became involved. And our just thought was to elevate the exposure of it. We had a tremendous public relations focus to publicize the winners every semester. And, GTE, loved it. The Coach Sida really liked it. In fact, about 10 years into it, we developed another spinoff of the core program, which was called Straight Talk About School. And we took academic All-Americans into high school assemblies and had them talk about the importance of a balanced approach to life, a balanced approach to education. And that program was very well received as well. So we had a full team that was dedicated to the academic program. GT then expanded into the NFL. They were the exclusive telecommunications sponsor of the NFL for 10 years. And we also created and ran PGA golf tournaments, primarily on the senior tour, or the Champions Tour for GTE. And that became a lot of fun too. And our strategy on that was very interesting. We went to GTE and said, look, don't just be a sponsor, be an owner of these tournaments. And so our team ran the event for GTE with them as the owner of the event. They earned the revenues. They covered all the expenses. They weren't in it for profit, so they turned over all the revenues to participating charities. But we felt, and they felt, that being an owner gave them much more control and presence over the marketing and the visibility. And we had events in Seattle, in LA, in Dallas, in Tampa, in Indianapolis, and that became a major program as well. And just as a sidebar, I don't think anything in sports compares to a major golf tournament in terms of the administrative work, the staging work, and all of the effort. It was about 9 months of effort before the tournament date, with marketing, volunteers, charity, ticket sales. I mean, you name it. It was really a big undertaking for each of these tournaments.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's what's amazing to me is you're kind of a serial entrepreneur guy, which is, I mean, it's a mentality and a kind of a, I don't know if you call it a skill set or, I mean, some people have it, some people don't. But you're 25 years old, you start mill sport, right? Is that 25? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty damn young. I mean, I have a daughter that, I mean, so at the end of the day, you're responsible really for starting, quite frankly, a lot of careers in this industry. I mean, I talked to
Well,
somebody who was a pretty senior executive at Octagon, and she told me, yeah, I got my start at mill sport. That's got to be cool for you.
no, I'm really proud of it all, but I will say that if there was one kind of common denominator to it, uh, and I think this is maybe relevant in terms of people looking for careers or looking to get ahead in the industry, is the creative factor in terms of not limiting your thought process in terms of ideas in sports or ideas in event marketing. I think, Millsport, for the most part, I mean, we really owned no properties. We didn't represent athletes. The only energy we really had going was our ability to work with our clients on good ideas to move their business forward. And I would say that if I was 25 now, or if I was, in college and getting going, one of the things I would think about is, is new ideas that I could bring forward to people that I wanted to try to get hired by or partner with or work with. Because I think that creative ability, if you have it, can really be valued in the marketplace. And I think it's a way to set yourself apart from, sometimes hundreds of people that are looking for the same position. And I've found over the years, there's very little downside to putting forward a new idea. The worst case is it doesn't work out, it doesn't get accepted. But the best case, like the academic program, we invented another program for the NFL. Some of you might remember from years ago, called the NFL's Fastest Man. And I mean, what a simple idea. Who's the fastest athlete in the NFL? And we brought that idea to the NFL. We got their approval to market it. We did a really good job getting big sponsors like DHL and Subaru and Sprint to underwrite it. And, for what ended up being about 8 minutes of total action, we had a half-hour network television special that ran for 9 years. So, and it was all just off of that creative spark of an idea of who's the fastest runner in the NFL. So, we had a philosophy at Millsport that I think helped us retain our best employees, which was not unique, but it was great ideas can come from anywhere. And we really kept our door open to any employee, no matter what level, to be able to come forward with an event idea, a sponsor idea, what we call a leveraging idea to help a sponsor get value out of its property. And that was, that was probably one of our best skills, is when Visa signed with the Olympics. It was a $40 million global package, much more than sponsors ever paid for big property. And I actually was one of the team members that presented the recommendation to the Visa board of directors. And, we outlined how we thought we could leverage those rights to make that investment profitable. And it wasn't just that it was a nice image, and it wasn't that it would be clever advertising, but, bottom line, how were we going to pay off, $40 million in rights? And we were very lucky with Visa that back then and even now, they are so large that even a 1% growth in card usage in the US alone can pay off a big investment like $40 million. So the strategy became, how can we get cardholders to be more positive about Visa, use their cards a little more often, because Visa is an Olympic sponsor. And if we could accomplish that, we could turn over good profits. And it led to 4 big renewals by Visa, even though the rights fee continued to go up. And creatively, we had a great spark, a great idea called the Gold Medal Athlete Program, which we invented, and it was a new way to train Olympic athletes. And our thought was to bring together three different elements that could help athletes. One was motivation, meaning getting them exposure to other Olympic champions and to get them to listen to champions talk about what it takes to be an Olympic athlete. The second area was sports science, where we put on elite sports science training camps so that athletes could come in and be exposed to the most modern science and training techniques. And the third element was premier coaching, where instead of an athlete having just their own coach, they could come to a clinic and they could experience the advice of 20 or 25 coaches in their specialty. And that Gold Medal Athlete Program, Visa created advertising around it. It became a real focal point of their Olympic leveraging, and it really did the job for them. It helped generate a lot of incremental revenue and was a great success. In fact, 6 years into the sponsorship, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times rated Visa the second most effective Olympic sponsor after Coke, who had been at it for about 40 years ahead of us. So we were very pleased about Visa along with GTE as a lead sponsor. And our third big anchor was Pepsi, which was a different story, but also a lot of fun, a lot of great results with Pepsi as well.
Very interesting. And then you're dealing with, I mean, major corporations and major, organizations like the NFL. So, this is not small time stuff. At the end of the day, this is it, right? This is where it's at. And I'm curious. It just crossed my mind because you mentioned the Olympics, and I thought of guerrilla marketing. And if you would, I mean, I'm not sure if this group, I probably do. I'm sure they've taken sports marketing, but explain to the group what guerrilla marketing is. Guerrilla marketing is what, if you've ever used that, or how you've combated that. Because if you're dealing with Pepsi or Visa at the Olympic Games, and that everybody else is trying to get their name out there, how do you deal with something like that?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, from my memory, it really began at the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, where Kodak had been the longtime official film of the Olympics, and in LA, Fuji had won the rights from them and had taken over that category. And Kodak was so upset that what they did was they bought a whole series of outdoor billboards in and around Los Angeles, promoting their Olympic heritage and everything they had done with the Olympics for years and years. And, that, gave birth to a phrase that I think started as ambush marketing and evolved into guerrilla marketing. And I think they're interchangeable now. But it underscored the fact that an event like the Olympics is really not one that a sponsor can have complete exclusivity. There are a lot of ways to look Olympic and tie in with the Olympics, not necessarily officially, but you can hire athletes to endorse your product. You can sign with an Olympic federation like the ski team or track team. And to the average consumer, those tie-ins will look very official, and they will erode to some degree the exclusive sponsorship that the official company will have in a given category. And some of the guerrilla highlights for me were, we had Reebok as a client, and at the Barcelona Olympics, Nike had the rights to the player uniforms of the Dream Team basketball team. But Reebok had the rights to the warm-up jerseys and the clothing that you wore before and after the games. And there became a real issue on the award stand as to what the athletes were going to wear. And the Olympic Committee required the athletes to wear the Reebok over jersey. But led by Michael Jordan, there was kind of a athlete revolt against that. And it became a real conflict and a real guerrilla marketing example between the two brands. And there's two really distinct points of view about ambush marketing. On the one hand, led by the official sponsors, they think that it's immoral and that their rights are being eroded and that it's harming the Olympic property, of which the rights go to help the event, help the athletes, and all of the rest of it. On the other side, the ambushers feel that they've done nothing wrong, that it's completely legal, that it also helps the athletes in terms of, if you support the ski team or the track team, those athletes are benefiting. If you sign an athlete, then that athlete benefits. So it's really a church and state kind of point of view about ambush marketing. The other huge area of ambushing is buying media time, where until a few years ago, you could buy time in the Olympics, you could buy time in the Olympic trials, even if you weren't an official sponsor. And if you're using an athlete and you're in Olympic television, you're sure looking, somewhat official. Now, NBC primarily changed that about 4 years ago, where now they have a blackout where a competitor of the Olympic sponsors cannot buy time on Olympic trials, Olympic events, or certainly the Olympics themselves during the period of the games. So it's a way that at least NBC could protect their official Olympic sponsors.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. So I'll pause here to see if anybody has any questions or wants to chime in with a question.
I have a question.
Go.
So you mentioned the Pepsi All-Star softball game and NFL's Fastest Man. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into creating them and ensuring their success throughout the years?
Sure. The Pepsi game was one of my favorite stories because it literally gave birth to our agency. And had it not worked out, I'm not sure we would have stayed in business back then. But it came from a hot bath one night, and brainstorming what I could do in sports and in sports marketing. And at the time, there was something called the Superstars on ABC, which took athletes out of their specialty and had them swim and play basketball and do things that were not their core sport. And they presented that as special programming. And I thought, and it got a reputation to be called trash sport because a lot of those athletes, weren't showing great skill in sports they weren't great at, but it was entertaining and their personalities came out and that was all great. So my thought was that if you took Major League Baseball stars and had them play softball, you would take a little bit of that Superstars element, but it would be genuine because the skill of playing softball very much translated into baseball. So my uncle, who was our company attorney in our first year, he was a minority owner of the Cleveland Indians baseball team. And I'm from Cleveland originally. So, and his name was Armin Arnson. I went to Armin and I said, hey, Armin, I have this idea for an all-star softball game, but I don't have contacts. I don't have the wherewithal really, I think, to get this done. And he loved the idea. He thought a number of the Indians players would agree to do it. It was for charity, which was a nice element. And so he used his contacts. And, I'll remember this until I die. But one afternoon in his office in Cleveland, we telephoned Pete Rose and Brooks Robinson.
Nice.
And pitched them on the softball game over the phone and asked them if they would be willing to play. And the dynamic was you would earn $1,500 if you were on the winning team and $1,000 if you were on the losing team. You got an all-expense-paid trip to a nice resort in Florida, and you got the satisfaction that the gate would be donated to charity. But I think the number one most important thing was that our pitch was, even though we didn't have this arranged yet, our pitch was that this would be on network television. So the fact that there was another way for Brooks and Pete to be recognized as all-stars, they made a little money, they had a nice weekend, so they agreed to do it. And we were frankly a little bit blown away. They were two of the superstars of the day. And I went to kind of a cold call to CBS Sports, a guy named Kevin O'Malley, who was the head of programming. And I presented him with not only the idea, but a sample roster of the other guys that we would invite that would play in the game, American National League. And, you know, I to this day, I don't really know why he was enamored with the idea. It was good counter event programming for CBS. And he said, look, if you can get anywhere close to the lineup you're presenting, we're in. And so he agreed to, and you know, this really dates how long ago our agency started, because it's not that way anymore today. But he paid us a $25,000 rights fee annually for the game. He agreed to cover all the production. He brought his announcers to the event. And with Brooks and Pete and a television network, we were in business. You know, we then went out to approach corporate sponsors, and you know, their name could be on the uniforms. We owned the field, so we could banner and provide great signage for the sponsor. And you know, part of the media sports advertising business back then was very cutthroat. And Dave, to your point about guerrilla marketing, and me being 25 years of age, I have a sidebar story. I approached a number of different sponsors about doing this, and it was still, you know, kind of a one-off, one-time event, not an ongoing property like the Olympics. But we were able to get really strong interest from McDonald's. And we thought that would just be fantastic. And I was so excited. And in fact, the only condition McDonald's had was that they have to be able to buy commercials in the show around the sponsorship. And I thought, man, this is so great. My deal with CBS doesn't even require me to bring them commercials. Now I could come back to them with a sponsor who wants to buy commercials. What could be better? Well, what turned out was that Burger King had a sports exclusive with CBS. And McDonald's knew that. And so I think their whole interest in my event was not the event, but the fact that maybe this could be an inroad to attacking Burger King and eroding Burger King's exclusivity.
Nice.
And so I went back to Kevin at CBS, you know, told him how thrilled I was about McDonald's. He said, Jim, great, but really a big problem here. We can't do McDonald's. So I had taken a long time getting that far along, and I was now about 6 weeks from the game without a sponsor. And I was at a point where, you know, we were going to lose money, which I think we could survive, but it would be not good at all. And I we had decided on sickle cell anemia as the charity for the game. And I had met with the sickle cell organization, and they had given me a banquet program to one of their events. And in the banquet program, Johnny Walker Scotch was a prominent sponsor. So coming at it from the charity angle, I cold called on Johnny Walker, and I said, hey, look, we have a network television event that is going to feature prominently sickle cell. This would be a great vehicle for you. And then in a kind of a funny story just about how the twists and turns of life can go, I made this pitch over the phone to the head of PR at Johnny Walker, and her name was Peggy Barrington. And what I had done is I had called the president of Johnny Walker, and he had given me Peggy's name to call. So when I called Peggy, she misunderstood my introduction, and she thought that her boss wanted to do this event instead of just referring me to her. So she was like, oh, well, if John Heilman wants to do this, I'm all in. And so she, in one afternoon, approved the sponsorship. I think really unbeknownst to her boss at any point, but we were pleased. They did a great job with Johnny Walker. With sickle cell. We were able to get good signage, and then I have a quick press story, which is kind of a clever anecdote or an interesting anecdote behind all this, because I mean, candidly, I much preferred McDonald's to Johnny Walker for obvious reasons with baseball and youth and all of that. And we had a golf pro-am the day before the softball game where we had baseball players playing with sponsor guests and clients. And I was paired in the golf outing with a guy you might know now named Skip Bayless, who works for ESPN. And Skip is, at that time, wrote for the Miami Herald. And he came up to Boca Raton to cover the softball game. And Skip and I played golf. And after 5 or 6 holes, after about an hour or so, we really started to get comfortable with each other. And, being inexperienced and young, I said to him, in a perfect world, we wouldn't want to have Johnny Walker as our title sponsor. We would have loved a company like McDonald's or somebody like that. And so we continued the day. And the next morning, in our hotel lobby, the Miami Herald is there in the newspaper machines. And I get one out, I open the sports page, and the lead banner headline is sports promoter doesn't want title sponsor. It was like a negative headline about my feeling about Johnny Walker. And I almost fainted, for lack of a better term. So I had our staff, frankly, run around to the newsstands and the hotels in the area and buy out all the Heralds so that our client wouldn't see this horrible story of me trashing them. And they never did. They never saw the story, which was really lucky. Skip and I never talked again. But it really taught me about being careful with what you say to the media. And, when you're on the second hole of a pro-am and you say to Skip, this is off the record, it doesn't necessarily mean that by you get to the 9th hole, you're still off the record. So it was a good lesson in media relations. But the best thing, Deanna, about that game, one of the best things, was there was really a question about whether the baseball players would take it seriously. Would it be just a lark, or would they really compete? And in the very first inning of our first game, we had 2 at-bats, which, again, I will never forget. The first was Willie Stargell hit a pop foul ball into the bleachers that we had installed on this temporary softball field. And Carl Yastrzemski dashed over to the bleachers, ran up 3 levels of the bleachers, and caught this foul ball, really risking injury. And we were just amazed at that kind of effort. And then in the bottom of the inning, one of our players hit a pop fly to short center field. And Pete Rose, who was playing roamer in softball, that's the extra position from the 9. Pete Rose, with his back to home plate, ran full speed toward the center field fence, all out dove and caught this soft liner and crashed into the ground. And from there, it told me that the players would really play hard. And it set an example for everybody there, all the other players, that, hey, we ought to really give this a go. And it was a great success. We had Johnny Walker for 2 years. And then I had a friendship with the head of advertising at Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut became the 7-year sponsor of the game. It was called the Pizza Hut All-Star Softball Game. And Pizza Hut's big partner was PepsiCo. And our client went over to Pepsi. He introduced me to Pepsi. And Pepsi liked the game a lot. And they took it over as the Pepsi All-Star Softball Game for about a 12-year run. And that was the experience of it. But one last anecdote that I will tell you about it is, in one of our games, we had a Hall of Famer, Cy Young Award pitcher Jim Palmer from the Baltimore Orioles pitching, and he was lobbing slow pitch to Rod Carew, many-time batting champion, one of the great contact hitters of all time in baseball. And he struck out Carew in slow pitch softball. And he later told the media, that's the last time I'm ever throwing a fastball to Rod Carew. From now on, I'm just throwing him off speed as slow as I can. And we had a tremendous amount of fun with that game. I think we ended up with about 35 Hall of Fame players over the years compete. And we fortunately had no one ever get hurt. And it was really fun.
Jim, it's funny because I love the stories. Unless we have some real baseball fans here, these guys are probably too young to remember a lot of these names. But you're right; they're Hall of Famers. So for those of you who know, we do a radio show. Mark Jeffers, who's the chairman of our advisory board, and Jim is coming on the show on Wednesday night. So, Jim, we need to talk about the Skip Bayless story, and the one you just told about the players, because that's great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one last story on the softball game. In year 2, we were playing at a resort called Boca West, and the players were staying at a gorgeous hotel called the Boca Raton and Club, and they took a bus over to the game, and of course, the bus broke down. And I remember thinking, Dave, that we probably have the wealthiest collection of bus riders maybe on a broken bus in history. And, the hotel scrambled and sent over a backup, but just really, really good memories with that game. And we had one of the fun anecdotes when you talk about customer hospitality, we added a bat boy element to the softball game where we had 4 to 6 bat boys and bat girls participate in the dugouts of the 2 teams every year. And those positions were such prime hospitality opportunities for our clients' kids. And I still to this day get, notes from clients saying, my son, my daughter will never forget, being a bat boy with, Mike Piazza or, any number of really great stars that played.
That's awesome. No, that's terrific stuff. So I'll open up to questions again in a second, but I have a couple of thoughts on my own here, just in terms of on the business side. But what is it like, when you're talking about some obviously not just serious people in the sports industry, but you're negotiating with the top companies, McDonald's, Pepsi, Johnny Walker. I mean, and for the edification of our students, how do you go about? Because it's got to be nerve-wracking, or kind of the trepidation of calling on a sponsor and getting your foot in the door. How do you go about doing that?
Well, a couple of things. I think the strategy to tie in with an ad agency, which we did a number of times and was ending up 16 years of our existence, was triggered by that when we weren't affiliated with an ad agency, I was spending a ton of time pounding the pavement, cold calling, and really having a hard time getting, the right level hearing for our proposals. But with the ad agency, the head of the account would give us an introduction. We'd be coming in on, very friendly terms, and we would get, a very good airing with the decision makers. But the key to it that I learned, Dave, on selling sponsors was it's all about them. It's not the event per se, and it's certainly not about us, but it's first and foremost their business. And so a lot of our proposals began with a presentation about the fact, you're doing this, we want to move you to here, And the way we're going to do, we would take in almost every sponsor discussion, what is it going to do for their business? And how are we going to prove that case? And then we get into the bells and whistles and the fun of it. But really, it became about moving their business forward. And in that Pepsi example, we invented an idea called cans in kids' hands. And the idea was to provide stocked soda coolers for Little League teams that they could take to their ball field and use for their players. And we distributed 50,000 coolers filled with Pepsi that, you know, blanketed their major markets. And it worked out okay. It wasn't a super great program until Walmart became aware of it, and they came in as a co-sponsor, and they increased the distribution heavily, and we really had a major hit on our hands with Walmart supporting the youth baseball program. So, you know, again, I just say that a lot of the sponsors, you know, they want to hear about the Olympics. They want to hear about what a great agency we were. That's all well and good, but you know, to catch their ear and to really get them engaged, you know, how are we going to move their business from A to B? And if we have a compelling case behind that, then we can almost talk about anything after that, because that's really what they want to focus on. So, you know, whether it was GTE or Visa, a lot of it was starting with, you know, with their philosophy and, you know, their priorities and what could we do for them. You know, our pitch to GTE about the NFL was literally putting them on the map. They were secondary to AT&T and others in the telecommunications category. And here we were going to have them leapfrog over everybody and become the official partner of the NFL. In addition, their top 8 markets were all NFL team cities that they supported. So places like Seattle and Dallas and Tampa, there was a great local fit. But we would start with that and then start talking about some of the other benefits. But one quick other point about GTE, we found a couple years into working with them at Super Bowl that they didn't really have, and I don't think many sponsors had or even have today, an extremely sophisticated approach to how you measure customer hospitality. And we went to GTE with a relatively simple model, which was, look, you're going to have 150 guests come to Super Bowl. Let's measure how much dollar business those 150 are doing with you 2 months before Super Bowl and 3 months after Super Bowl, and see what kind of a bump that is. And that dynamic gave them, it was about a 5-to-1 return in business growth on just the cost of their hospitality program at Super Bowl. So we ended up using that with Apple, with a number of others, but that measuring hospitality was another example that it's just not, you know, feeling good and having the client have a good time, but how are you really going to measure it?
Yeah, that's an important fact right there for sure. Jim, I'm very interested in, and we've never really talked about this, but your time as, obviously, you know, after you sell Millsport and you're kind of, as like I said, you're a serial entrepreneur guy, so you start another company, but you know, your time as CEO of USA Boxing, because you moved out to Colorado Springs to do that, right? Is that where they were?
Yeah.
Going? Yeah.
I mean, that was a good example of when, frankly, when you've had some success, how easy it is to get too arrogant. After selling Millsport, I really thought that, you know, I could pretty much do anything, and that this challenge came along to be the head of Olympic boxing. And at the time, and frankly still today, Olympic boxing is at the absolute bottom of the barrel in terms of sports organizations. They are, you know, financially near bankrupt. They have got, I cannot even describe how many major problems they have as an organization. But I thought with my experience at Millsport, I could come in I could get some sponsors, I could help get the revenue going, and could really turn things around. And frankly, even going back to college, I had a real love for boxing. I think it's a very electric sport, and I thought that it would be fun to work in. And so I joined them as CEO, had some great success for the first year. The organization had been on probation with the USOC for 8 years. In my first year, I got us off probation. But frankly, Dave, it was a nightmare. I mean, an absolute, total, and complete nightmare. Highlighted, I'll give you one example for those of you looking to make a career in sports. I would say once or twice a month for my entire tenure at USA Boxing, I would be on a conference call that resulted from a young boxer, age 8 to 12, being seriously injured in a youth boxing match. And that child would either be in a coma or severely hurt. And on the conference call would be the medical team, the insurance group, the parents' attorney, and me. And in many cases, because we as a sanctioning organization for the sport, we were in charge of all of boxing, even all the way down to the grassroots level. Well, what would happen, folks, in like Wichita, Kansas, there'd be a night of boxing, and there would be all the age group matches. And what would happen is a 12-year-old boxer would have his opponent not show up. And so the organizer would put the boy in against either an older boy or a heavier boy, and it would result in some kind of injury. And I'm telling you, twice a month, this would be the routine. And so, you know, going into the job, Dave, it was all about the Olympics and, you know, the fun of Olympic boxing. And there was some of that. But I remember at one of my first board meetings, you know, the board asked me my take on the organization and, you know, what I thought the biggest problem was that we faced. And I said that the biggest problem you have to face is the volume of problems you have. You know, it is not just the safety child issue, but you have promoters that are trying to sign your athletes to become pro on the eve of the Olympics. You have local organizations like Golden Gloves that are at war with each other on a local level, deep financial, I mean, it was like a litany of difficulties. And so after 2 years, frankly, we agreed to, you know, to part ways. We had you know, a unsuccessful lawsuit against the USA Boxing Foundation, which was hoarding, you know, millions of dollars of cash and would not earmark any of it for USA Boxing. They were just holding it for some future dream moment. And we studied the bylaws. We thought that we could take the foundation back and use some of those funds, but we weren't successful. And the financial difficulties and all the other difficulties, it just was you know, it was time to leave. But absolute complete nightmare.
You know what? We've never had this conversation before, and I really appreciate your honesty in that answer, Jim. I mean, that was, you know, that's very enlightening. I, like you do, I grew up watching boxing, you know, the 76 Olympics, you know, that whole group. And my dad was actually a Golden Gloves boxer. So we actually did quite a bit of boxing when I was a kid. I mean, not supervised, but just kind of beating the heck out of each other in the backyard with boxing gloves on. But you know, it's a sport that, you know, I understand what you're saying, but I also appreciate your kind of candor with that. That's very interesting to me.
Well, I've got two quick anecdotes. The first was when I was a junior in college, I had the idea to promote the closed circuit telecast of Muhammad Ali against Joe Frazier and bring it to Athens, Ohio, and to rent out our 16,000 seat convocation center and promote the fight in Athens. And in order to rent the center, I had to form an Ohio University boxing club, which I did, and we rented the Convo Center. But what ended up happening was the promoter, who was a subcontractor of Jerry Parenchio, a very well-known boxing promoter, he changed the terms on us about a month before the fight. He wanted a big guarantee. He wanted a big advertising guarantee on top of that. I could do neither of those. So, I dropped the, the project, and it, went away. But, that was an interesting anecdote. And the second anecdote, and, this was unbelievable. During the softball years, I go to Cleveland to meet with my attorney, my uncle Armand. And the meeting he was having before me was a Cleveland local area boxing promoter named Don Elbaum. And Don was suing a famous fight promoter named Don King. And he was meeting with Armand on planning his lawsuit against King. And God is my witness, it's a true story. I go in and meet with Armand, and about 15 minutes into the meeting, Elbaum comes back upstairs. His car has been firebombed down on the street in front of the attorney's office, which he was sure was done by King. But it was a little bit of it should have been foreboding lesson to not get that excited about boxing. But I'm first and foremost a lover of sports, and of all the major events that I have been to, the electricity in the arena of a big boxing match, I think, is second to none. And that's just kind of a side observation, but I really feel that way.
Frazier Ali in the Garden. Frazier was my guy. Love Joe Frazier.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's throw it open again to any questions from the group here. Anybody have any thoughts, questions for Jim?
Hi, Jim. Thank you for joining us today. How have your events and sponsorship activations evolved over the years as technology evolved?
Well, we were, a little bit pre-technology with a lot of our business. I wrapped up at Millsport in 2004, and the digital world was really, just starting to get its momentum at that point. We had Visa had a digital agency that they used to promote the Olympics, and they did quite a bit around that. But it was really a fledgling science, if you will, back then, or fledgling media. And so the big era of high tech and digital social activity didn't really take hold till after I was done at Millsport. So I'm probably not the best person to comment on that. In our last years of working with Visa, the digital agency was part of our leveraging group that would sit in and participate, and they did programming and there was activity, but I think it was prior to a lot of measurement standards, and really didn't end up being a big budget line for how our sponsors leverage. Now at Pepsi and at Visa, it's huge, but it wasn't back then.
Okay. Anybody else? Question?
Yeah, I have one.
Go.
So for other people that would be like interested in being an entrepreneur, what would be some advice that you would give? Like, what was it like what were your struggles and challenges of being an entrepreneur, and what was it like starting up for you, like first getting into it?
Well, I mean, I think that, I really started on the back of that idea of the softball game. So it was like having a creative spark that, kind of gave birth to the whole agency. And then from there, I was lucky enough that it expanded and got a lot of momentum. But I think, my advice would be, a couple of things. I mean, one, as much as possible, try to think out of the box. It's a cluttered market. There is so much that goes on. On the other hand, at least on the sponsor side, there is such high stakes for these sponsors to succeed at their different endeavors. So, if you have an idea for, Coca-Cola and the Olympics, or whatever sponsor it might be for whatever sport, don't be shy in thinking of that as the possible entrepreneurial spark that could begin something. I mean, one that, I'll just donate to you right now that I am intrigued about is with the pandemic, but not only with the pandemic, I'm really intrigued about why there aren't more online interactive sports competitions in terms of both, traditional games like chess and checkers and hearts and, some of the more modern games. Esports is obviously gigantic and, really expanding, but, that's less to a degree of national interactive competition. I'm old line, I play online checkers, and I wonder why I've never seen, a national online checkers tournament. I mean, I'd be all over it, and I'm indoors constantly. So, I'd pay $5 or $10 as an entry fee, 10 million competitors, and you're in business. So I think that spirit of being able to think creatively and, not be depressed by roadblocks or turn downs or rejections. You have to have a really thick skin. For every Pepsi and GT and Visa, there were probably, 10 or 20 clients that didn't hire us or fired us or whatever. So you have to really have good perseverance, a good positive attitude. There was a guy that I listened to whose name just flew out of my head for a minute, but he's the CEO of the Blackstone Group. And I heard him speak at the 92nd Street Y, and he had a phrase about entrepreneurial spirit, which was 1 in 50, in that he would be looking to have one success, one sale in 50 attempts. That was his ratio. And, I always took that as good advice, not necessarily 1 in 50, but just the idea that you can have an awful lot of rejection and you only need one hit and you could be in good shape.
Very interesting point you make there, because I just met this morning with George Bodenheimer, who you probably know. George was president of ESPN, and he's a good guy. He's a good friend. We had breakfast, and we were talking about that, about the sales call, and because we were talking about actually about people trying to get jobs, and it's just like, he said, a no is just, you just move on. You don't take it personally. You just say, okay, this door is closed. Now I move on to the next one. So that's really, it's a numbers game, really. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and then Kyle, I just think the other point is again what I said before. If you're in a selling mode or talking to sponsors, the more you can put them first. Hey, I saw this commercial you ran. I saw this campaign you're doing. It's interesting to note that blah blah blah. And I really think I have an idea that can do this for you. And, it's almost a surefire way to get your prospect's attention with the idea that you're thinking about them first and not, gee, I'm so great at this, or I have this, great event idea, or whatever it may be. Anybody else?
Yeah. Hi, Jim. Thanks for joining the class. My question to you is, do you have any regret, or are you happy with your decision to sell Millsport to Omnicom?
That's, I mean, yes and no. I mean, there's been, when I first sold to Omnicom, I had no regret because this is a little bit of a history lesson, but if you go back 15, 20 years, there was a big consolidation in the advertising world where small agencies were being bought up by big conglomerates, and there were just a handful of big powers that were dominating the ad scene. So small agencies, both in specialties like sports and in all kinds of marketing fields, were more and more challenged to be competitive because the clients wanted scale, they wanted leverage among their big agencies, and so we jumped on that bandwagon when we sold to Omnicom. Now the slight regret, although it wasn't a fundamental regret, but when you join on a group like Omnicom, it makes it very hard to do business with clients that are not part of Omnicom. You're seen as the competitor coming in. The client's ad agency is very skeptical about you because you're affiliated with a competitor of theirs. And tied into that, Omnicom had a philosophy which I don't really agree with, but they didn't care about Millsport per se if they saw another agency that they could buy that was competitive with us. So by the time we were done at Millsport, there were 4 or 5 agencies that Omnicom owned that were all in the same field. So I describe, the Omnicom market as kind of a cocoon, and we were in a much more competitive cocoon at the end. I still think at the end of the day, it was more worthwhile doing it than not doing it. And then at the end of concluding the sale to Omnicom, I really had no regret about that for a couple of reasons. One, it had been about 28 years. I was really burned out. The workload was unbelievably intense. Red-eye flights to see Visa a couple times a month, a tremendous workload. But more important, the business really changed where relationships became less the issue than procurement agencies that were examining how we build. And I could bring Visa a $10 million idea, but if I only spent 3 hours working on it, the procurement agency would say, well, you can bill us for 3 hours of your time. And the fact that it's got all this impact, we're not really going to measure that or count that. And then the last element was, and I think you're all aware of this, but all of the pro leagues have now become much more sophisticated and much more intense about their own internal marketing and leveraging. When I first started, none of the leagues had internal leveraging groups. So, I would go to NFL and I'd have an idea for one of their clients and they were all over it. But in the later years, there would be a little bit of, well, why do we need you to help us with this client? Or less that than really, these are our clients. We should be the ones in their doors talking to them about how to leverage the rights that we've just sold them. So between the intensive competition in the leagues, the intense competition in Omnicom, and this procurement pricing analysis that our clients were doing, it really became a very, very tough business. And I had gotten, more enamored with this internet idea, and it was time to go.
Interesting. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up, and I just have 2 more quick questions for Jim. Anybody else have anything before I?
Can I ask a question? Oh,
Go
you can
ahead.
go first. Hi Jim. I wanted to know, we talked about the Olympics a little bit and like sponsors and branding rights. How prominent do you think it is for sponsors wearing, like when countries are choosing what they're gonna wear? Like, do you think that that makes a huge impact on that business or brand to be able to be represented like on the podium? Because I know 1 year for the Winter Olympics, the US used polo. They used like the US polo stuff. So I just
Well,
thought that was interesting that we talked about it.
I think that the athletes and the organizations have, to some degree, very little to do with it. It's really a competitive bidding process based on money. And it's really, is Nike going to pay more than Adidas? Who's going to pay more than Reebok? And the style, the reputation of the company, the image is very secondary to who is going to step up and pay the most for the rights to that team. And, just as I've talked about, measuring results and measuring value, the teams do a good job in laying out how much exposure the brand is going to get from the television coverage and the events that the teams have. So you have a sport like, let's say, figure skating, and they have a whole year of skating events on television, and then it culminates with the Winter Olympics. So to be the official clothing of figure skating, can get a lot of exposure. Now, having said that, skating, you're not really wearing Reebok or Nike. You're wearing a, fancy skating outfit. So you may get more value out of a sport like, track and field or gymnastics or something else where, the Nike or the Adidas is right on the uniform. So it's super competitive. Our agency got involved. I don't know if any of you remember a famous ad campaign called Dan versus Dave, which was Dan O'Brien versus Dave Johnson in the decathlon at the Atlanta Olympics. But Millsport became aware of our work with Visa in decathlon. We became aware that Nike's contract with Dan O'Brien and Dave Johnson was about to expire. And decathlon does not get a lot of television coverage. It's really, a secondary sport in terms of media. So we went to a friend of ours at Reebok and said, hey, Dan and Dave are going to be out of Nike. We think you guys should sign them. The decathlon champion is considered the world's greatest athlete. At the time, Dan O'Brien was #1 in the world. And we thought you could do a great ad campaign around Dan versus Dave. And they bought it, lock, stock, and barrel. They signed the two athletes. They ran a very expensive ad campaign featuring the two of them. And the campaign was focused on, who would win. At this point, it was 4 years earlier, who would win in Barcelona at the Olympics. And, in a good lesson of, sports being real life and it's not made up or scripted, Dan O'Brien did not make the Olympic team for Barcelona. He had a terrible pole vault and he didn't qualify. So the whole ad campaign went up in flames before Barcelona. Now, Dan came back. He won the gold in Atlanta 4 years later. But it was just an example of Nike having so many athletes, so many visible athletes, that they took their eye off the ball a little bit with this niche sport of decathlon, and Reebok was able to jump in and grab the two best in the world.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm kind of sorry I started the class late.
No problem.
Hey, my question is actually similar to MJ's. I wanted to know what the atmosphere was like at Millsport after gaining the notoriety and the national prominence with your involvement in the Olympics and the NFL throughout the 90s. I wanted to know how it was working with Frito-Lay, Pepsi, and what was the other one? And Visa.
Right. Well, we had it was tremendous. It was tremendous. We were having great success almost on every front. You mentioned Frito-Lay. I didn't really even talk about it, but we put Tostitos into a title sponsorship of the National College Football Bowl game. It was the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, which ran for 8 years, was great success for them. But, the atmosphere was great. And I think it started with the fact that all of our senior team really, really worked hard. No one was phoning it in. Everybody was rolling up their sleeves and, really working hard. And that set the tone and set an example for everybody else. And we were able to be, I don't know why, but we really had a non-political environment. Everybody liked each other. We had great teamwork, great camaraderie, a lot of friendships out of the office. And with all the success we were having with clients, it was just a blast to go to work, and really, really great fun. And the client retention led to employee retention. We were able to keep our good people. We had very little turnover. So it was, I would describe it as one of the real best environments of the agency world at that time. Now, with all that, Taro, we were still, a pretty small agency. You don't get rich on some of these client fees. So even though we grew to about 100 people, if we lost any one or two big clients, it would be a huge setback. So, we always had to watch ourselves, and, it was constant work. And, I talk about, 15 years with the Pepsi softball game, whatever it is, to one degree, we were only as good as our last event. If we had a big failure, we would be in trouble. And the only thing these clients were hiring us for, beyond our ideas, was the execution of these events and these sponsorships. So if we fumbled and dropped the ball, it would be bad news, and we would really try to be diligent not to do so. But to your question, I can't imagine it being any more fun. And I've got friendships today at Pepsi and at Visa, people who have long since retired, who remember it as kind of the heyday of great sports marketing.
Jim,
Thank you. That's honestly one of the ones I wanted to ask, but thank you.
Yep.
appreciate that. Jim, looking at you go in a second, just want to, two quick things from me. One, you're probably working on your next venture, I'm sure. I know you have a lot going on, and love working with you. But if you were to need help and were to see some resumes or some of these people reach out to you, what would you be looking for in candidates? What kind of skill sets? What kind of, what would you suggest to them that they kind of hone in on here as they start their or advance their careers?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that one thing would be an example, one or more, of being a good self-starter. Something that you did kind of A to Z, that you took on or handled, and it could be a subset of a job or of an assignment or even a school experience, but something where you demonstrated that you were resourceful, that you could take something from beginning to end to whatever degree and work it through and overcome hurdles, surpass roadblocks. That to me is like the number one thing that, that I was looking for at the end at Millsport and would look for now. And because that implies not only a capability, but a self-confidence that, you can handle yourself, you can handle situations. So I think that being a self-starter would be the one distinguishing point. Then I think the other thing that always impressed me resume-wise, and sometimes it was not in the resume, but more in the cover letter, is something personal. Some experience that you had, with family or community or friends that says something about you that is not work-related or experience-related per se, but I overcame this, or I helped this person, or I volunteered, or whatever it is. I think that's the other element that I like.
Yeah, good input there. And if you could just tell us a little bit about the book, obviously it's The Adventures of Millsport. So I'm sure there are more stories than what we just heard. I'm sure some of what you told us are in the book, but tell us about the book and where the guys can get it if they're interested.
Sure. Yeah, it's an easy read, and it charts the history of the agency. If you go to incubate.com, you get a discount from Amazon or others, and you could order it, and I hope you enjoy it. But it's really funny. You guys are all so young. I went on a golf vacation with my son Matt, about 9 months ago or so. We were in Palm Springs, and he was a bat boy in the softball game, and he remembered, a lot of the experiences of Millsport as he was growing up. And it just hit me that, that frankly, after I'm dead, if you will, the company and all the work we did and all the experiences are really going to be gone. They only exist in people's memories and in the like, if you will. So I thought, I have a new grandson, and I thought, gee, it'd be great to have a record of what happened and the fun we had and the experiences and the successes and the setbacks and the difficulties. So, that was the impetus of it. And it, it charts all the way from, high school working with ABC Sports through college and, all the way through. And, I'll share two very quick stories if we have a minute. One, what I'm doing now is an example of the spirit of you can do anything. And I have no idea whether I can or not, but I'm personally very intrigued about how broken our system of government is. I think it has become totally dysfunctional. And I frankly don't think that even if Joe Biden wins, it's going to change much in terms of its real ability to be effective. So, changing the government is not something I'm able to take on or do, but I have it in my mind that one of the things that could help America would be to operate more as a business. I mean, just imagine if a system got voted in democratically that said, hey, we're going to run this country not with two houses of government, but we're going to run it like a company where we're going to have the departments being the cabinet, and it'll be single line decision making. Partisanship will be gone. Federal elections could be gone. And knowing that I can't make that really happen, but what I can do is maybe make a fictional story about that. So I've written a screenplay called Amendment 28, which would be the amendment which would put this into effect. And I'm pitching Netflix and Amazon and Apple and Showtime on doing a series about the changeover of the government to a more corporate business system. And it's pie in the sky, who knows, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. And that's one of the things I'm working on.
I think
and then the second anecdote is just a fun moment from the Munich Olympics, 1972, way back. I was in college summer and working with ABC, working at basketball way out of town in Munich. And the night before the final game, or the night of the final game, ABC had a sound check with all their venues. And all their announcers would come on and do a 2-minute pretend opening so that they could check sound levels and check the audio of all the different venues. Well, in our case, the basketball hall was so far away that our announcers, Frank Gifford and Bill Russell, were not there yet. So the coordinating producer said to me, well, Jim, we're going to do this sound check. When we come to basketball, just give me a 2-minute opening of tonight's game. So, here I am with, the 7 premier ABC announcers, Jim McKay, Chris Schenkel, Bill Fleming, and on, and me. And it was so intimidating. And basketball was like second last. And so it was Chris Schenkel throwing it to me, and I did my 2 minutes about the Russian-American basketball final that night. The Americans favored. This would be their toughest game. Americans were unbeaten to this point. Turned out that Russia ended up winning that game in a horrendous referee mess at the end. But then at the end of my sound check, I was able to kind of throw it to Howard Cosell at boxing. And, these, 40 years later, it's still really an unbelievable memory when the only people listening were, the ABC sound truck and the other announcers, but it was great.
Yeah, those are landmark. These guys are way too young for that. In fact,
Yeah.
I mean, I was very young myself when those games happened. But that's a great story. You're gonna have to pick and choose which stories you tell on the air on Wednesday night, because it's only an hour show. But no, it's great stuff. Jim, we appreciate your time. Great input, some great advice here. So thank you, and I'll be in touch with you. We'll talk Wednesday.
That's great. And to all of you, feel free to email me. Dave has my contact information. If you have any questions, if you need any advice or want any help, I'm very happy to do whatever I can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right. I'm not gonna give you guys, I want to think about what I want to do for the assignment for this, because we do have some people missing, and I need to think about, because I think they need to do some extra work, but appreciate it. And by the way, your responses I thought were really good from the last week, and also I had some good material come in on your assignment to interview somebody high up in one of the teams or leagues and I understand it's not easy to do. It's a tough assignment, but keep trying, because it'll be worthwhile. So next week, Doug Perlman, Sports Media Advisors, another great guest. Doug was the vice president of the National Hockey League. He's an attorney. He does basically, he basically tells the leagues and teams and a lot of other people where they should be putting their money for sponsor dollars and the like. So he's going to be good. And then obviously we have Amy Trask in November. Catch up on your assignments if you're behind. I'm tired. I'm not going to beat you up anymore, but for the people who aren't here, they're going to get beat up quite a bit. So that's my story. Jim, thank you again, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night. I'll
Good to meet
email
you
you
all.
all tomorrow. All right. Thanks.
Take care, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.